When Ayla first walked through the gates of the military unit, she looked more like a lost schoolgirl than a future soldier. She wore a faded t-shirt, pants 2 sizes too big, and a canvas bag that looked like it had been through a storm. From a distance, the soldiers were giving her looks, not of sympathy but of mockery. "Is she lost? Did she come to clean?" Someone shouted from the row, and laughter spread across the square like a wave. Ayla didn't react. There was something in her eyes they couldn't name, a quiet determination and something more than just a dream. Her father, a mechanic who worked for free at a nearby military garage, had told her stories about flying machines throughout her childhood. He had once shown her the cockpit of an old MiG and said, "You don't have to have wings to fly, you just need someone to not clip them." That day, no one knew that a girl had just crossed the threshold who had no money, no connections, and no special treatment. But she had one thing: determination, etched in her heart like a rocket's launch code. Instead of a room with other cadets, she was given a bunk in the storeroom among the toolboxes. Instead of combat boots, she was given her own, sewn together with thread by her mother. Even in her documents, someone had misspelled her name, as if they had assumed she wouldn't be staying long anyway. But Ayla stayed, and no one, yet, understood that the story they intended to ridicule was about to become legend. The first day of physical training was like a test designed to weed out the weak. Ayla was the shortest, the skinniest, and the least dressed. She had one pair of pants that she had to hand wash every night, and waterproof boots that leaked. When she lined up with the other recruits, they looked at her with a mixture of pity and amusement. "He won't last a week," said Kasia, the colonel's daughter, with a smile full of contempt. The commander glanced at Ayla's figure and sighed theatrically. "If you go down, no one will be sad," he said coldly, before beginning a grueling series of runs, push-ups, climbs, and mud maneuvers. Ayla had no strength or stamina. She had something else: images of her childhood, running barefoot through the hills, carrying mechanical parts for her father. She remembered the smell of engine oil and the sound of propellers, watching them from the shadows. She fell more often than most. Her hands were bleeding, her knees were bruised, but she always got up, silently, without complaint. During one of the exercises, when she had to carry a heavy backpack through a muddy river, Kasia laughed at her again. "Will you get your thrift store bag wet?" Ayla looked her straight in the eye. "It's not a bag. It's a future you don't understand." The sentence traveled through the unit faster than an order. Suddenly, she was no longer just a poor girl. She was someone with something to prove. That evening, after another day of humiliation while everyone else slept, Ayla sat in the dark with her notebook. She drew, not flowers, not dreams, but the cockpit of a fighter, step by step. Every switch, every screen. She wasn't here to survive. She was here for something more. While the other girls were relaxing in the common room, complaining about the hard day, and gossiping about the handsome instructors, Ayla sat alone, on a crate in the corner of the maintenance hangar, staring at the pieces of dismantled engines. There, in silence, she discovered more than she could in a lecture hall. Every night after the curfew, she would sneak into the back of the workshop where her father had once worked. Although she was officially off limits, no one paid any attention to the broom girl, and that was exactly how she wanted it: to be invisible, to see everything. She noted the layout of the pipes, memorized the pressure ratios, and analyzed the readings from the panels. One evening, a senior technician who had a habit of staying late noticed her. Instead of throwing her out, he knelt down next to her and asked, "How do you know these markings?" Ayla answered without hesitation, "From my father's book. He only had one, but I knew it by heart before I was 10. The man smiled. "That means you're the only person here who read the instructions to the end." From that day on, he secretly began leaving her stripped panels, tools, and challenges. Ayla solved them silently, as if her life depended on it, and in a way, it did. In formal classes, she was still the one who was told to fall back in line, who was ridiculed for her lack of strength, elegance, and military character. But in secret, she was becoming something else, someone who knew the machine from the inside. While others were memorizing the rules, Ayla already knew how to take to the air. She didn't have wings yet, but her heart was beating in rhythm with a jet engine. In the 3rd week of training, the day everyone had been waiting for arrived, the first flight in the simulator. For the cadets, it was a moment of testing. Each of them had to sit in the pilot's seat and prove that they could master the machine, even in virtual reality. Kasia, confident as ever, entered the simulator cabin as if she owned it. With a smile on her face and giggles from her colleagues in the background, she performed the maneuvers with precision, until she unknowingly pressed the wrong switch and the simulator simulated a crash. Her face paled, but no one commented. She had a last name that no one wanted to offend. Then it was Ayla's turn. A murmur went through the room as she entered the cabin. She wasn't wearing gloves. Her hands were raw from working in the workshop. The hands of a poor girl who looked like she had no right to touch modern buttons. "It's about to crash on takeoff," someone in the room said. But Ayla remained silent. She sat down, adjusted the seatbelt, checked the panel, and before the instructor could say anything, she initiated the test procedure herself. The flight began smoothly. Every maneuver was precise. She swept the terrain like someone who knew every parameter, every movement of the air. Even the instructor raised an eyebrow. And then, the screen froze. Not through Ayla's mistake, but through malice. Someone in the back had deliberately cut the power. The simulator shut down. The room erupted in laughter. "The power went out because she didn't pay the bill?" someone said spitefully. Ayla stood up calmly. She looked at the technician. "I managed to run the entire sequence before the power went out. Can someone check the record?" And she left, without a word, without tears. But that evening, the instructor approached her with a piece of paper. "I don't know who you are, but you're doing better than half your class. And that was your first time." After the training simulator incident, the room was alive with gossip again. Some laughed at the malfunction, others suspected sabotage. But there was also a quiet group who for the first time began to look at Ayla differently, not as a strange, poor girl from the outskirts, but as someone who actually knew what she was doing. Still, Ayla didn't feel any better. She knew that one simulated landing didn't matter. She knew that too many eyes were looking at her not with admiration, but with anger that the girl with no name could threaten them. And in the military, reputation mattered more than score. Kasia couldn't stand it when anyone spoke well of Ayla. The next day, she deliberately, accidentally pushed her into the muddy area behind the canteen. Ayla fell. Her uniform was soaked to her knees. A few girls laughed, but most just watched, and didn't react. "Do you know where your place is?" Kasia hissed. "On the ground." Ayla rose without a word. Her eyes were calm, but there was no resignation in them, only determination. And something else, as if she already knew the ending of this story, though no one else had seen it yet. That evening, she went back to the workshop. There she was met by the same senior technician who had been leaving tasks for her for the past few days. "You have something that can't be taught," he said, placing a stack of papers on the table. "These are the schematics for an actual F-35. If you really want to fly, start here." Ayla didn't answer. She just nodded and sat down, quietly, in the light of a single lamp, with mud on her pants and a glint in her eye. She started drawing, not dreams, but trajectories, maneuvers, engines, because she knew that if they didn't let her into the pilot world through the door, she'd fly in from above. The elimination rounds for advanced training were approaching, the stage that paved the way for real flights. Out of a dozen or so girls, only 3 were to be chosen. As expected, everyone assumed that Kasia would be one of them. She had everything: the back, the equipment, the military history in her family. Ayla had nothing but results, but no one wanted to notice them. The instructors, surprised by the progress of the girl from nowhere, proposed a practical test. A test flight on board a light training fighter, of course, with an instructor on board. This was an exceptional event, because cadets were rarely allowed to this stage so early. "It's just a formality," Kasia whispered contemptuously when Ayla's name appeared on the list. When the day of the flight arrived, Ayla showed up on time, though with a hint of anxiety in her eyes. She knew the theory, she knew the schematics, she knew every button, but this was the first time she was actually going to get off the ground. She sat confidently at the controls, with her instructor by her side. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The machine took off smoothly. It rose as if it knew Ayla's hands. Every movement was precise, sure, deliberate. The instructor looked at her in disbelief every now and then. "How do you do it?" he finally asked, as Ayla performed a maneuver that usually only worked after months of practice. "Before I started flying, I had my head in the clouds for a long time." On the ground, the cadets looked at the sky, and for the first time, they fell silent, because where they had only seen a girl with mud on her shoes, A legend was rising in the making. After landing, the entire base knew one thing. No one would laugh at them anymore. But that was just the beginning. After the fateful test flight, Ayla no longer returned to the canteen with her head bowed. She continued to eat alone, not because no one wanted to sit with her, but because she needed the silence to process what was coming. The next day, she was summoned to the office of the colonel in charge of recruiting for the elite aviation program. As she entered, her stomach tightened, not with fear, but with disbelief that, after years of humiliation, someone serious would want to sit down with her face to face. "Sit down, Cadet Ayla," the colonel said, not yet looking her way, busy with the papers. "You have results here that are incredible. Your flight analyses, your lightning-fast reactions, your composure." Ayla nodded, not breaking the silence. She had nothing to add. She spoke in her flight. "Most pilots achieve such results after years. You did it after a few weeks. That's why we have a proposition for you. Training at a foreign NATO center. One place. 2 candidates. But you already know who the second one is." Ayla didn't have to ask. "Kasia. The decision will be announced in a week. Until then, don't talk to anyone. And don't let anyone undermine what you've achieved." As Ayla was leaving the office, she noticed Kasia standing by the door, phone in hand and a look of hatred on her face. Before she could say anything, Ayla just looked at her and whispered, "What matters doesn't fit in your pocket. It fits in your heart." That evening, for the first time, some of the cadets approached her of their own accord, not with mockery, with respect. But the war she was supposed to fight had not yet begun. A week before announcing her decision to go on an international training, Ayla felt like she was in a minefield. Her every move was being watched, her every gesture assessed. Kasia, with a calm face but angry eyes, wouldn't let up. Someone had put grease under her door at night, causing Ayla to slip and painfully bruise her hip in the morning. Another day, her lecture notes had disappeared, and right before a big practical test, her uniform locker had been jammed. But Ayla didn't scream. She didn't ask for help. She borrowed an old uniform from the storeroom, too big, worn, with a torn shoulder strap, and so she took the test. And then, she passed it, the best of the group. After the test, she was approached by one of the younger mechanics who often saw her in the hangar. "I know someone is sabotaging you, but how you handle it, that's not strength, it's character." That evening, sitting on her bed in her empty room, Ayla reached for a photo of her father, a hard-working aircraft mechanic who dreamed that his daughter would fly further than birds. "Dad, I haven't won yet, but they can't stop me now." And then she heard a knock on the door. It was Marta, the quiet girl from the next room. She brought something Ayla had lost, her tattered notes, which someone had thrown in the trash behind the building. "Not everyone is against you. We were just afraid of Kasia." That evening, Ayla was not alone for the first time, but she knew that Kasia had not said her last word yet. The day of the final test arrived. It was a combat simulation. Each candidate had to perform a mission in a full F-16 flight simulator, with the task of intercepting and neutralizing an air target in extreme conditions. The results were to decide who would go to international training. Kasia entered first. Her face was a perfect mask of self-confidence. But something was wrong. Although the simulation started as planned, she lost contact with the target halfway through the mission, reacted too late, panicked, and crashed the machine into a virtual mountain range. When she came out of the cabin, the silence in the room was heavier than a scream. No one dared to look her in the eye. Then Ayla came in an old, worn-out jumpsuit with her hair tied back with string and eyes that no longer sought approval. She knew why she was here. The simulation began. Movements, clean. Decisions, lightning fast. When the target appeared, Ayla not only located it, but predicted its trajectory. She performed a maneuver that the instructors had never seen even professional pilots do. Target neutralized. The plane landed unharmed. In the silence that followed, only her breathing could be heard. The instructor walked up to the desk, read the results, and looked at everyone. "Base record. I repeat, base record." This time no one laughed. Not even Kasia, her face pale, as if she understood for the first time that name, status, and connections are not enough when someone who has given every second of his life for his dream stands across from her. Ayla emerged from the cabin. She wasn't triumphant, but there were tears in her eyes. Not from happiness, from relief, because she just proved that the girl with no name can have wings stronger than all of them put together. That evening, a special meeting was held in the briefing room. All the cadets, instructors, and senior officers gathered to hear the official announcement. The colonel came onto the stage. His gaze moved over the faces of those present, from the haughty Kasia, through the uncertain cadets to Ayla sitting modestly in the second row. Today's results not only ended the training phase, they opened a new chapter in the history of this base. There was a commotion in the crowd. Kasia pursed her lips as if holding her breath. Cadet Ayla Nowak is going to international training as part of the NATO program. There was silence. And then, something unexpected. First, Marta started clapping, then another girl, and another. The room erupted in applause, not forced, not courteous. It was the sound of recognition. Real, hard-earned. Ayla stood up, stiffly, as if afraid it was a dream. Someone patted her on the shoulder. Someone else offered a hand. Coming out on stage, the colonel handed her a diploma and then, lowering his voice, said, "Your background doesn't matter. Your skills, that's what got you here. But remember, don't forget where you came from." Ayla nodded. There were tears in her eyes, but this time, from pride. As she returned to her seat, she looked out the window, at the runway, at the dark sky. She already knew. This wasn't the end of the road yet. It was the beginning of something she hadn't even dared to dream of. A week later, Ayla boarded a military plane to take her to a NATO facility in Germany, carrying only a small backpack, a photo of her father, and a diploma from the Polish base that, although limp in her hand, was heavier than many a bag. No one on board knew her. The officers spoke English, and the other cadets from different countries looked at her with curiosity, but also with reserve. Instead of triumph, Ayla felt silence. The same silence she had always known. The first days at the center were brutal. Other participants had expensive watches, the latest aviation equipment in their backpacks, contacts in embassies. Ayla, only determination, and stronger hands because she spent her entire childhood carrying groceries instead of dreams. She did great in theoretical classes, but during field exercises, no one wanted her in the group. "You're the charity case, right?" she heard one day from one of the American participants. She was silent, because she knew that look, she knew that tone, and she knew the answer was not words but actions. In the evenings, she went out to the hangar area, sat in the old training cockpit and closed her eyes. In silence, she imagined her father pointing out the levers, showing her the controls, and then saying, "Don't look at what others have. Think about how high you want to rise." The next day, she performed a simulation that even her instructors had not anticipated. She introduced a new maneuver trajectory, saving reaction time by 17%. And then they started watching her, not with pity, with admiration. After Ayla's extraordinary maneuver in the simulator, everything changed. Overnight, she became the talk of the town, not only among the cadets but also among the officers. One of the instructors, a retired combat pilot from Afghanistan, approached her after class and said, "You know who last did something like that in a simulator? The guy who now commands an entire U.S. air wing. And you're even better." Shortly after, at an official NATO panel with generals from several countries, footage of Ayla's simulation was shown. Her name was displayed on a large screen. A Polish name. A girl who, not long ago, didn't even have decent shoes. The hall fell silent. And then, applause. Official, loud, clear. Kasia was also sitting in the audience, because as part of the partnership program, the Polish base sent a delegation, and Kasia, unable to bear losing, volunteered as a technical assistant. She hoped to meet with Western commanders. However, she didn't expect Ayla to be the face of the entire presentation. She watched as the girl she had once called the poor bastard from the block stood proud, in a new color uniform, with insignia that had not been bought, only earned. After the ceremony, Kasia approached her, shyly, for the first time, without the mask of superiority. "I didn't know you were incapable of so much." Ayla looked at her calmly. "You knew. You just pretended not to see." Kasia lowered her gaze, because now everyone saw. A few days after the NATO panel, a package arrived at a military base in Poland. Inside was a letter from the International Command and a recording of Ayla's simulation presentation. On the envelope was a single word, example. The base commander didn't wait. He called all the cadets, staff, instructors, even the civilian workers. In the briefing room, where Ayla had been ignored not long ago, her name was now displayed on a large screen. The video of the air maneuver caused a storm of emotions. Some watched in amazement, others in shame. Marta, the girl who had once helped Ayla find the notes, cried with emotion. After the presentation, the commander looked at everyone and said, "Don't judge people by their appearance, by their clothes, by their address. Because in this country, the biggest wings can be those that grow in the tightest backyards." From that day on, the unofficial saying around the base was, "Do it like Ayla." And in the small town, where her mother still cleaned the school, a journalist from the local newspaper showed up. "Is it true that your daughter was awarded by NATO?" The woman looked at him with a smile, but also with tears in her eyes. "Yes, that's the same girl who wasn't wanted in the flying club because she didn't have dues. Now, she flies above them all." Ayla's story began to circulate on social media. Her photo in the cockpit of an F-16 appeared in motivational stories, in articles about equality, in news broadcasts. But Ayla didn't seek fame. She just wanted to show that the nothing girl is often someone who just hasn't been given a chance yet. The day came that changed everything. The closing ceremony of the international NATO training took place in a huge aircraft hangar in Brussels, with generals, ambassadors, families of soldiers and journalists from all over Europe in the stands. Among the flags from a dozen or so countries, one flag flew higher, Poland, and next to her, Ayla. She wore a new uniform with a patch, combat pilot, Class A. Her hair was tied up and her gaze, calm, focused, strong. When the event's host announced it as the biggest revelation of NATO 2025 training, the audience erupted in a standing ovation. But Ayla didn't yet know what lay ahead. "Before we hand out the certificates, we would like to honor one person for their exceptional attitude, fortitude, and extraordinary achievements." Everyone looked at her. "Please come to the stage." Ayla Nowak. Her heart was pounding. She walked between the rows as if in a dream. But it wasn't a dream. A NATO Air Force general was waiting on stage. In his hands he held a medal, a special one awarded every 5 years. Not because you are from Poland, not because you are a woman, but because you have proven that the values of the Army, perseverance, courage, and sacrifice, can be had even without a name, money, or influence. Behind her, a photo appeared on the big screen. Ayla sitting in the cockpit of an F-16, her hands on the controls, her eyes full of faith. There was one question from the audience, from a journalist. Where did this strength come from? Ayla smiled slightly and replied in her language, "From poverty, from silence, and from a dream that everyone said was too big for a girl from a block." After the ceremony, as the lights dimmed and the delegations began to leave, Ayla lingered on the tarmac for a moment. She walked over to her plane, touched its fuselage, and closed her eyes. She heard no more applause or jeers. She heard the silence that had been her only companion for years, and now, her deepest strength. She returned to Poland a few days later. At the military airport, her mother, a few instructors, and a delegation of young people from the town she came from were waiting for her. Among them was a girl with a backpack ruined by the rain, her shoes full of holes, and her eyes like Ayla's once, uncertain but sparkling. Ayla knelt down next to her and handed her her old patch. "Here you go. This is for you. Just promise me one thing. Never let poverty tell you who you are." The girl nodded. Then she hugged Ayla with all her might. A few months later, a new mural appeared at the same school where Ayla once cleaned the hallways with her mother. It was huge. It showed a young girl in a pilot's uniform standing in front of a plane and looking at the sky. Next to her was an inscription. "Not everyone was born to fly, but everyone can fly higher than others tell them." Signature Ayla Nowak, the girl who showed that it is worth believing. And thus ended the story of the girl who was laughed at. But the stories of those who, thanks to her, believed that they could do it too, have only just begun.